The satellite feed flickered once, then held. In the operations center at Bagram Airfield, 17 pairs of eyes watched the grainy thermal image of a figure crawling across open ground, trailing a phosphorescent smear that could only be blood. The man was Captain Derek Moss, Callsign Reaper 6, and he'd been dragging himself toward the extraction point for 4 hours. His radio was dead. His team was dead. And according to the mission clock, he had 11 minutes before the Taliban fighters tracking him closed the distance. His brother was in that operations center. Lieutenant Marcus Moss stood behind the tactical coordinator, hands gripped white on the back of a chair, watching the screen like it was the only thing tethering him to sanity. He'd already sent the text. It sat in his phone's outbox, unsent only because he couldn't bring himself to hit the button. The message read, "Goodbye, I'm sorry. You would have made a great uncle." No one spoke. The air mission commander had exhausted every option. The Apache gunships were Winchester out of ammunition after a 6-hour running battle. The Pavehawks were grounded by a rotor malfunction. The AC-130 had a hydraulic failure. The fast movers, the F-16s and F-15Es, were all tasked to another valley where a convoy was getting shredded. There was nothing close enough, nothing armed enough. Nothing that could reach him in 11 minutes. Marcus stared at the screen. His brother had stopped crawling. Someone whispered that he might already be gone. Then the radio crackled. A woman's voice, steady and low, with the kind of calm that only comes from flying too many missions to count. "Bagram, this is Hog 1-1 checking in on Mission Freak. I'm holding station 70 miles southwest with full combat load. Heard the call for CAS on guard. Say status." The air mission commander leaned forward. "Hog 1-1, Bagram, we have no air tasking for you in this sector. You're out of your assigned patrol grid." There was a pause. When she spoke again, there was no apology, no hesitation, just fact. "Roger that. I'm also the only asset airborne within 100 miles who can put steel on target before your guy bleeds out. Now say his position." The room was silent. Marcus looked up. Hog 1-1, the A-10, the Warthog, and flying it apparently was someone willing to ignore orders to save his brother. The air mission commander's jaw worked. Then he made the call. "Hog 1-1, Bagram, stand by for coordinates." The woman on the other end didn't wait. "Already inbound, send it." Captain Alara, St. Kavak, had been flying combat missions since she was 23. That was 9 years ago. 9 years of close air support over Helmand and Kandahar and Kunar. 9 years of flying low and slow through curtains of tracer fire to put ordnance within meters of friendly forces. She'd taken ground fire on 62 sorties. She had 3 confirmed gun kills. She'd been written up twice for unauthorized low-level flight, and once for telling a colonel exactly what she thought of his tactical priorities. None of that had made her popular. What made her unpopular was simpler. She was a woman flying the ugliest, meanest jet in the Air Force, and she was better at it than most of the men who'd flown it before her. They didn't say it to her face. They said it in the ready room in the Chow Hall, in the mission debriefs where her after-action reports were scrutinized with a kind of hostile fascination. They called her reckless. They called her a cowboy. They called her saint because the first time she'd flown close air support, she put a Maverick missile through the window of a compound where hostages were being held, taking out the captors and leaving the hostages untouched. Someone said it was divine intervention. She said it was math, but the name stuck. And now she was pointing her nose toward a valley she had no clearance to enter, with a man she'd never met bleeding out below. She checked her fuel, 40 minutes. She checked her weapons, 2 Mavericks full-gun rockets, enough. She pushed the throttles forward and the accelerated with its characteristic growl, low and predatory. Below her, the mountains were dark. Marcus watched the satellite feed. His brother had started moving again, inch by inch. The thermal signatures of the Taliban fighters were converging from 3 directions. The math was simple. They would reach him first. He looked at the mission clock, 8 minutes. The air mission commander was talking to Saint, relaying the coordinates, the situation, the danger. Marcus couldn't hear her responses. He could only see the screen. And then in the corner of the feed, a new thermal signature appeared. Fast moving. Low altitude. The shape was unmistakable: twin engines, straight wings, a profile designed for one thing. The A-10 came in from the southwest at 300 feet, and every insurgent in the valley heard it before they saw it. The sound of the Warthog's engines is like rolling thunder, deep and relentless. Saint didn't announce her presence. She just flew straight into the kill zone, lit her targeting pod, and began identifying targets. The first group of fighters was moving through a draw 200 meters from Derek's position. She armed a Maverick, locked the thermal signature of their lead vehicle, and fired. The missile streaked downward and the vehicle disintegrated in a bloom of white light on the thermal feed. The operations center erupted. Someone shouted. Marcus didn't move. He watched his brother start crawling again. Saint banked hard left, bleeding airspeed, and came around for another pass. The second group of fighters had scattered into a tree line. She couldn't use missiles there, not without risking collateral damage to Derek, so she armed the gun. The GAU-8 Avenger is a 30mm rotary cannon built around a concept so simple it borders on absurd. Put a gun so large on a plane that the plane is essentially designed around the gun. It fires depleted uranium rounds at a rate of 65 per second. The sound it makes is not a buzz or a roar. It's a rip, like the sky tearing open. Saint lined up her run, adjusted for wind, and squeezed the trigger. The gun sang, 30 rounds. The tree line exploded in dust and shredded vegetation, and the thermal signatures went dark. She pulled up, inverted, and rolled back around. The third group was running. She let them run. Her priority was the man on the ground. She keyed her radio. Bagram, Hog 1-1, kill zone is clear. I'm holding overhead. Get your guy out. The air mission commander's voice was tight. Hog 1-1, you are cleared to RTB. The Pavehawk is lifting now. Saint didn't acknowledge. She stayed. She flew slow circles above Derek Moss, wings wobbling in the thermals, and she didn't leave until the helicopter was on the ground and the pilot radioed that they had him. Only then did she turn southwest, back toward Bagram. The operations center was still silent. Marcus was staring at his phone at the unsent message. He deleted it. Saint landed 40 minutes later with fuel enough for 10 more. She taxied to the ramp, shut down the engines, and climbed out of the cockpit without ceremony. The crew chief met her at the ladder. He looked at the jet, then at her. You took ground fire. She glanced back. There were 3 holes in her left wing, clustered near the root. Hydraulic fluid was dripping onto the tarmac. She shrugged. It'll buff out. He shook his head. How the hell did you even know about that mission? She didn't answer. She walked toward the operations building, her flight suit still damp with sweat, her helmet bag slung over one shoulder. Inside, the air mission commander was waiting. He didn't smile. He didn't thank her. He said, Captain Kovac, you flew outside your assigned patrol area, ignored chain of command protocols, and engaged without proper clearance. I'm writing you up. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, good, make sure you spell my name right. She turned to leave. And that's when Marcus Moss stepped forward. He was still in his uniform, his face pale, his hands shaking. He said, wait. She stopped. He said, my brother, that was my brother. She met his eyes. She didn't say anything. He said, thank you. She nodded once. Then she walked out. The story might have ended there. But 3 days later, Marcus Moss received a call from Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. His brother was awake. He was going to make it, and he wanted to know who'd flown the A-10. Marcus told him. Derek was quiet for a long time. Then he said, tell her I owe her a beer. Marcus said he would. But when he went looking for Saint, she was already gone, transferred, redeployed. No one would say where. The official story was that she'd been reassigned for disciplinary reasons. The unofficial story, the one that spread through the ranks like wildfire, was that she'd been pulled because she'd made too many people uncomfortable. She flew too hard. She cared too little about politics. She was too good and too willing to prove it. The men who resented her said she'd finally pushed too far. The men who respected her said the Air Force couldn't afford to lose her, so they'd buried her somewhere she couldn't cause trouble. Either way, she was gone. But the story wasn't. It spread. From Bagram to Kandahar, from Kandahar to Qatar, from Qatar back to the States. It became the kind of story people told in ready rooms, in bars, in the quiet hours before missions. They talked about the A-10 that broke protocol to save a captain bleeding out in a valley. They talked about the pilot who flew into a kill zone alone and came out with holes in her wing. They talked about Saint. A year passed. Derek Moss went back to the States, medically retired, and started teaching history at a high school in Ohio. He married his girlfriend. He bought a house. He had a daughter. And every year on the anniversary of the day he nearly died, he tried to find the woman who saved him. He searched through Air Force channels. He reached out to pilots he knew. He posted on forums. Nothing. It was like she'd vanished. Then 2 years after the mission, Marcus called him. He said, "I found her." Derek was in his kitchen. His daughter was in a high chair, smashing cereal into her face. He said, "Where?" Marcus hesitated. Then he said, "Afghanistan, she's back." Derek felt something cold settle in his chest. "Doing what?" Marcus said. "The same thing she's always done." Captain Alara Kavak was flying out of Kandahar now, attached to a joint special operations task force that didn't officially exist. The missions were blacker than black. The operations were so compartmentalized that even the people clearing her for takeoff didn't know where she was going. She flew at night alone, providing close air support for ground teams doing things that would never make the news. It was the kind of assignment most pilots avoided. High risk, low visibility, no glory. But Saint didn't fly for glory. She flew because someone had to, and because she was good at it, better than good. In the 2 years since the mission that saved Derek Moss, she'd flown 73 combat sorties. She'd taken fire on 41 of them. She'd been hit 8 times. She'd put ordnance on target within meters of friendlies on 60 occasions. She had 11 confirmed kills, and she'd never lost a soldier under her cover. Not one. The special operations community knew her name. They requested her by call sign. They trusted her in situations where trust was the only thing between life and death. But outside that small circle, she was still just a name on a disciplinary file, a pilot who couldn't follow orders. The irony wasn't lost on her. It was March when the mission came down. A 6-man reconnaissance team had been compromised deep in the mountains near the Pakistani border. They were pinned down, taking fire from 3 sides, and the terrain was too rough for helicopter extraction. They needed air support. They needed it now. Saint was the only asset available. She launched at dusk alone and flew northeast into a sky turning the color of bruises. The weather was deteriorating. Cloud cover at 8,000 feet, visibility dropping. The mission commander's voice was clipped on the radio. "Hog 11, be advised, target area is hot. Multiple technical vehicles, possible MA and PADS. Recommend caution on approach." She clicked the mic twice. Acknowledged. She didn't bother with caution. She dropped through the cloud layer at 4,000 feet and emerged into a valley choked with smoke and dust. Below, muzzle flashes sparkled like fireflies. She could see the team's position, marked by infrared strobes only visible through her targeting pod. They were clustered in a rocky outcrop, surrounded. She armed her gun, rolled in, and made her first pass. The GAU-8 roared. Dust and debris erupted along the ridgeline where the enemy fighters were entrenched. She pulled up, banked hard right, and came back around. The radio crackled. One of the team leads, voice tight but controlled. "Hog 11, good effect. We need you to work the southern approach." "They're trying to flank us." She adjusted, lined up, and fired again. This time she saw bodies scattering, vehicles burning, but she also saw something else. Smoke trail, rising fast. "Hog 11 missile launch." She broke left, released flares, and pulled the nose up hard. The missile streaked past, close enough that she felt the shockwave rock the jet. She leveled out, heart pounding, and keyed the radio. "Bagram, Hog 11, I've got MA and PADS in the target area. Continuing mission." The controller's voice was sharp. "Hog 11, you are cleared to disengage and egress the area." She didn't respond. She rolled back in. She made 4 more passes. Each time the fire intensified. Each time she came back. She used both Mavericks on technical vehicles. She used her rockets on a mortar position. She used her gun until the barrel was glowing and the thermal warnings were lighting up her cockpit. And then on her 6th pass she felt the impact. It was sharp, sudden, like someone had kicked the side of the jet. The left wing shuddered. Hydraulic pressure dropped. She glanced at the wing and saw the damage immediately. A ragged hole just behind the leading edge big enough to see through. Fluid streaming back. She checked her controls, sluggish but responsive. She checked her engine temperatures, nominal. She checked her fuel, 15 minutes. She keyed the radio. Bagram Hog 11, I've taken damage, left wing hit, hydraulic leak. Continuing mission. The controller's voice was urgent now. Hog 11, you are ordered to RTB immediately, she said. Negative. The team is still in contact. She rolled in for another pass. The team lead on the ground was shouting now not at her but at his men. Suppressing fire, suppressing fire. She could hear the gunfire through his mic, the sharp crack of rifles, the dull thump of grenades. She lined up her shot, adjusted for the damaged wing, and fired. The gun ripped through the darkness. The enemy position went silent. The team lead came back on the radio, breathless. Hog 11, you are a goddamn angel. We're moving now. She stayed overhead while they ran. She stayed while they reached the extraction point. She stayed until the helicopter was on the ground and they were loading up. Only then did she turn for home. The flight back was the longest of her life. The jet was barely holding together. The hydraulic pressure was dropping steadily. The left aileron was unresponsive. She had to compensate with rudder and throttle, flying the A-10 like a wounded animal, coaxing it through the air with sheer will. She made it back to Kandahar with fuel enough for one landing attempt. The tower was calling her, telling her to declare an emergency, telling her to prepare for a possible ejection. She didn't respond. She was too busy flying. She came in fast, flared hard, and touched down with a jolt that rattled her teeth. The jet veered left. She corrected with right rudder, kept it on the center line, and let it roll to a stop. The fire trucks were already racing toward her. She shut down the engines, popped the canopy, and climbed out. Her legs were shaking. The crew chief was staring at the wing. He looked at her. How the hell did you fly this thing back? She looked at the wing. The hole was bigger than she'd thought. She could see the internal structure, the damaged hydraulic lines, the bent metal. She said, carefully. He shook his head. You're insane. She didn't argue. Mission report was classified. The footage from her targeting pod was classified. The recordings of her radio calls were classified, but the men she saved weren't. They talked. They told the story of the A-10 that stayed overhead through a MANPADS threat, that took a hit and kept flying, that didn't leave until they were safe. They told the story of Saint. And this time, the story didn't just spread through the Air Force. It spread through the entire Special Operations community. The SEALs knew her name. Rangers knew her name. The Green Berets knew her name. They started requesting her by call sign for their missions, and when she was unavailable, they delayed operations until she was. She became a legend in the community, a ghost who flew an ugly jet into impossible situations and always brought everyone home. The Air Force, for its part, didn't know what to do with her. She was too valuable to ground, too problematic to promote, too effective to ignore. So they let her fly, and she kept flying. Mission after mission, month after month, until the day she didn't come back. It was August. A team was compromised in a valley near Gardes. They were surrounded, outnumbered, taking casualties. Saint was overhead within 20 minutes. She made her first pass, cleared the northern approach, and rolled back around for a second. That's when the ZSU-23-4 opened up. The Shilka is a Soviet-era anti-aircraft system, 4 23mm autocannons mounted on a tracked chassis designed to shred low-flying aircraft. The first burst missed. The second didn't. The rounds tore through her right engine, shredding the turbine and igniting the fuel lines. The jet lurched. Alarms screamed. She shut down the right engine, diverted power to the left, and tried to climb. The jet responded, sluggish but obedient. She keyed the radio. Bagram Hog 11, I've lost my right engine. I'm RTB. The controller's voice was tight. Hog 11, say intentions. Can you maintain altitude? She glanced at her instruments. Oil pressure dropping. Hydraulic pressure critical. She said, affirm, I'm maintaining. It was a lie. The jet was dying, she knew it, but the team below was still fighting. She made one more pass, put her last Maverick into the Shilka, and watched it explode. Then she turned for home. She didn't make it. The left engine failed 30 miles from base. She tried to restart it, couldn't. She tried to glide, couldn't. The jet was too heavy, too damaged. She had one option left. She keyed the radio one last time. Bagram Hog 11, I'm punching out. She pulled the ejection handles. The canopy blew, the seat fired, the world spun. She came down in a field of rocks and scrub 15 miles from Kandahar. The parachute dragged her 30 feet before she hit the release. She lay there for a moment, staring at the sky, feeling the ache in her spine, the burn in her lungs. Then she sat up. She was alive. The jet was not. She could see the smoke rising from the impact site, a black column against the blue. The rescue helicopter found her 20 minutes later. They loaded her up, checked her for injuries, and flew her back to Kandahar. She was bruised, battered, but intact. The flight surgeon cleared her, the commander debriefed her, and then he told her she was grounded, not for the ejection, not for the loss of the jet, but because, in his words, you've been lucky enough times. Eventually, luck runs out. She didn't argue. She packed her gear, filed her reports, and left Afghanistan for the last time. She was 32 years old. She'd flown 217 combat missions. She'd been shot down once, hit 14 times, and had never lost a soldier under her cover. She'd saved Derek Moss and dozens of others whose names she'd never know. And now she was done. Went back to the States. She resigned her commission. She disappeared. For a while people wondered where she'd gone. Some said she was teaching. Some said she was flying for contractors. Some said she'd just had enough. The truth was simpler. She'd bought a small house in Montana, far from any base, far from any flight line. She spent her days hiking, reading, fixing the porch. She didn't talk about the war. She didn't talk about the missions. When people asked what she used to do, she said, "I was a pilot." And left it at that. Derek Moss found her 3 years later. He showed up at her door with his daughter, now 4 years old, and a bottle of bourbon. He said, "I owed you a beer," figured bourbon was close enough. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. Close enough. They sat on the porch and talked. He told her about his life, his family, his students. She told him about Montana, the mountains, the quiet. He asked her if she missed it, the flying. She thought about it. Then she said, "Sometimes, but not the war, just the flying." He nodded. He understood. Before he left, his daughter ran up to Saint and gave her a drawing. It was a picture of an airplane, crude and colorful, with a pilot waving from the cockpit. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, it said, "Thank you for saving my daddy." Saint looked at the drawing for a long time. Then she looked at Derek. She said, "You're welcome." He smiled. And then he left. The years passed. The wars ended. The stories faded. But the men and women who'd flown with Saint, who'd fought under her cover, who'd been saved by her gun, they didn't forget. They told their children. They told their friends. They told the stories of the A-10 pilot who flew into hell and always came back, right up until the day she didn't. And in the ready rooms, in the bars, in the quiet moments before missions, they still said her name. Saint, Captain Alara Kovac. The pilot who never left anyone behind. The story became legend. The legend became myth. And the myth became something more. It became a standard. When young pilots asked what it meant to fly close air support, the instructors told them about Saint. When soldiers asked what it meant to have air cover, the sergeants told them about Saint. She became the measure against which all others were judged. And in the mountains of Afghanistan, in the valleys where she'd flown, the locals still talked about the plane with the bent wings and the sound like thunder. The one that came when the fighting was worst, the one that never missed. They didn't know her name, but they knew the plane. And they knew that when it came, people lived. That was her legacy, not medals, not commendations, not promotions. Just the simple, undeniable fact that when she was overhead, people lived. In the end, Marcus Moss kept the drawing his niece had made. He framed it and hung it in his office at the base where he eventually made colonel. Beneath it, he added a small plaque with a single line, "Hog 11, never left anyone behind." People asked about it. He told them the story every time, and every time he ended it the same way. "My brother sent me a text that day. He was going to say goodbye, but an A-10 broke low, wing torn but still fighting, and he never had to send it. That pilot saved his life, and she saved mine too in a way because I didn't have to lose him." The story spread. It always did. And somewhere in Montana, in a small house with a view of the mountains, Saint heard about it. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She just looked out at the sky, at the same sky she used to fly through, and she smiled. Because in the end, that's all she'd ever wanted. Not recognition, not fame, just to know that when it mattered, she'd been there. And that was enough.